Welcome back to another episode of the React Native Radio Podcast. Episode 347, Skylight, Smart Displays Powered by React Native.
Hey everyone, I'm Mazen and this is React Native Radio. Today I'm joined by Alex Lanclos, who actually works at a company that I'm a big fan of, and I think this will be a fun discussion that we'll have. Thanks for coming on to the show, Alex.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Mazen.
Likewise, yeah, and I'm happy to hear that you live in my neck of the woods. Not a lot of React Native people out here, as far as I know. I've only met like 2 or 3 from the Durham area. So yeah, can you please introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, I'm Alex Lanclos. I am a principal software engineer here at Skylight. I've been working here for almost 3 years, which is kind of crazy. Started whenever it was a team of around 5 or 6 engineers. And now we have more engineers today than we had full employees when I joined, which is a very humbling thing to think about, to be honest.
So you were there from the startup age to now with your full-fledged product. That's awesome. We'll get into more our topic in a little bit. But before that, let's hear from our sponsor. Infinite is a premier React Native consultancy fully located in the US. We're a team of 30 senior plus level React Native developers and support staff, and have been doing this for nearly a decade. If you're looking for React Native expertise for your next project, hit us up at infinite.red/radio. Don't forget to mention that you heard about us through the React Native Radio podcast. All right, let's get into a topic. Skylight in React Native. Alex, can you give me your elevator pitch for your app for people that aren't familiar with Skylight?
Yeah, sure. So I say that our app/product is a little unique. So our product suite is the one-stop shop for families. It'll help you plan your meals, manage your grocery lists, get your children to do their chores, reward them when doing them, sync your personal work calendar seamlessly, and more. And that's just for our calendar product. Our original claim to fame was our Skylight frame device, which was how can you share memories to your loved ones who aren't immediately by you? And we've carried those sort of traditions across our entire product suite today.
It's awesome. Yeah, because you have a hardware element to this, app, essentially. So before we talk about the app, which is fully React Native, the frame that you call it, it was never built in React Native? And what is it built in, and what were the reasons behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the frame itself has always been this hodgepodge of Android, if you will. So originally this product suite with the frame was started by Michael Siegel, our CEO, as a project that he was working on while he was in Harvard Business School. And literally slapping an Android device inside of a wooden frame. It always had early hardware problems as far as like how much we could actually load into this thing, especially as an early stage startup. And so they were concerned about software limitations. And so Skylight itself has been around surprisingly for 6-7 years now at this point. And so they wanted to make sure that they could give their best foot forward and decide to go with a native Android implementation, which sounds a little sacrilegious whenever we're talking on a React Native podcast, I know.
Yeah.
But they wanted to go with something that was closer to the metal a little bit, that didn't have to worry about a JavaScript bridge, especially back then, whenever React Native, was still very much so in its infancy. And as it's built out today, it's a Kotlin application, so very much so native Android development on an Android operating system.
Sure. Nice. Yeah, and I assume now with the new architecture, there's nothing stopping you all from probably porting it over to React Native and leveraging the code base that you currently have for the mobile application within a unified code base on there.
Yeah, that's something that we've actually have touched on a little bit. I pride myself in the fact that our React Native code base today is extremely easy to work in. We generally ship features on the client side for the mobile app a little bit faster than we do on the Android side, strictly due to the fact that we've spent a lot of effort actually digging it out from the brownfield that it was whenever I started to a rather beautiful greenfield application that all of us engineers here like to work on, whereas the Android side still has a little bit of warts and Jetpack Compose is a relatively new tool set on the Android ecosystem versus the old school XML style view development. And so that's there's still some up and up on that.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, okay. I think that's the hardware. We can kind of put that aside for a little bit. Even despite it being, the face of the product at the end of the day, we'll kind of focus on the mobile application because that's where, specifically me, that's where my interest is. Tell me a little bit, when did you start using React Native and why? Because I feel like when we were chatting before we started recording, I heard some pain points in there.
Yeah. So I started working in React Native personally and professionally around the end of 2017. So that was right around, I think, 0.49 React Native.
Yeah.
And this was at a time where I was working at a food delivery business based out of the southern United States that had 2 native repositories, and we had an extremely small team. And we had kicked the can a little bit on trying to utilize React Native at the time because we felt like it was too new. Around the end of 2017, we're like, let's give it a shot. It was too painful to maintain the 2 separate native repositories. And we want to spend our engineering budget on other parts of the ecosystem. At that time, auto linking was not a thing. So we're talking about you had to have, in my opinion, some idea about how the native side worked. You had to know how Gradle built. You had to know how, at the end of the day, how to utilize the build system that iOS provides either through Xcode or, obfuscating that a little bit with Fastlane and so on. And so the upgrade process for React Native was also quite tumultuous. I remember .60, whenever autolinking was first introduced, took an extremely long time to implement. So that's a little bit about my professional background in React Native. Skylight itself has been utilizing React Native for its mobile app since it was first introduced, which I think was right around .66 when they first started utilizing it. And whenever I joined back at the beginning of January 2023, I think they were on .70 and was already a little outdated at that point. And we've been using it since.
Awesome. Yeah. What is your architecture stack? Well, and what were some of the reasons behind it? Like, for example, are you all using Expo?
Yeah, we are. Nice. I was talking a little bit earlier about, the back in the day aspects of React Native, where Expo as a tool set was you had to use the full managed Expo solution set, or you couldn't use any of the tools at all. And I remember why do you need Expo? Just roll it bare. Like you're giving up so much fundamental access to what you can do with your application back then. Now, I think you'd be quite silly if you're not choosing to use Expo in your React Native application today.
Totally.
I think that you don't necessarily have to roll a full managed workflow. At Skylight, we still utilize a bare solution set. I think there's a couple other reasons as to why we do that. But in general, Expo's tool sets are very, very, very expansive. And to go a little bit further into the stack that we utilize here at Skylight, when I joined, it was a pure JavaScript application, Redux, and this is pre-Thunk Redux. So,
Ooh,
oh yeah,
that was fun.
Yeah, just a little bit. Class components, you name it. It felt like you just cherry picked an application out of 2017, 2018, and just stuck it there. And I picked that up in 2023. Today, we follow atomic design for our class component, our component architecture itself, TypeScript through and through, functional component sets. Shout out, bootstrapped a few of our early atoms from Ignite.
Nice. That's awesome.
At the time, our styling library we were utilizing was Dripsy.
Yeah. That's a package by Fernando Rojo, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That's correct. At that time, we wanted to start to introduce some more breakpointing, and we liked the design token solution that he had provided. However, that's been a point of contention for us here at Skylight, where we're actually migrating over to Unistyles. Unistyles v3, I think, was the thing that I had been waiting for quite some time. And their media query solution, I think in general, we found that components themselves also tend to have a little bit better performance.
Totally. I'm a fan of Unistyles, and I've been using Unistyles on all my projects, including, client projects too. And we've had a lot of success with it and feel, it's very performant in that sense. And I was speaking to Jacek, who's the creator of it recently, and he's, transitioning to Uniwind, so a tailwind for React Native sort of thing. But hopefully we'll have him one day on the podcast is what I'm saying. Like, it's a pretty cool solution. So kind of hear you moving in that direction almost sounds like what we've been hearing in the industry these days.
Yeah, I think providing a best-in-class styling solution in React Native ecosystem is a problem that I don't think the community has kind of adopted as like there's one head to crown sort of situation. I think the React ecosystem has kind of fallen behind the Tailwind side of things. I'm still not a huge Tailwind fan personally. However, I don't let those biases keep parts of my team from utilizing it on their pure React website solutions. The last bit of note about the application, we use Zistant for local state management, Reanimated for all of our animation-based logic, and we use Expo Router for all of our navigation. We had made that migration from React Navigation to Expo Router earlier this year.
Nice. Yeah. That actually, honestly, being frank with you, that sounds like a exact stack of what I'm using on my current project right now. Zistant is pretty fun and ergonomical, in my opinion, to use. So you must be excited coming from, plain Redux, I guess is the word to use here, to Zistant.
Yeah. Well, I guess the note here is that the way our Redux implementation was, it was ingesting all of the API data and local state management and kind of introducing it all throughout. And so you had your actions reducers, selectors, and so on. The way we ingest API information is actually through TanStack Query.
Nice.
And so we're a REST shop here at Skylight. So Rails backend, the way that we take that, we would like to have that separate dichotomy of API cached information, support that cache layer pretty thoroughly, and have Zistant as our local state management that, persisting specific user touches, how they interface with the UX itself. If we need to introduce information across multiple screens versus utilizing React context, we may use it in that case, but that's rather sparing. But yeah, coming from a spot where it was a full vanilla Redux application and trying to break apart that state management was a bit of a bear.
Yeah. That's actually, again, we use TanStack Query to ingest the API stuff. That's awesome. What about testing? What do you all use for testing?
So I think that our testing here at Skylight's a little interesting. So one, we have an amazing QA team. Whenever I joined, we had a singular manual QA who just knew the product back and forth and was he was a person that was fully capable of just helping us get the product through without any specific issues. Like he would catch any regressions and lifesaver. As the team has grown, you can't lean on simple manual QA as your total wall / barrier to having bugs go out and as regressions. So we're finally getting to the point where we can spend some effort on writing some more automated end-to-end tests. The tool that we use today is Maestro, which, I think from the React Native community has kind of been adopted as the de facto solution, in my opinion.
Yeah.
They're really easy to write. There have been a couple tools that I've used in the past, and they've all had specific issues one way or another. Maestro seemingly has kind of gone down that path of trying to obfuscate some of the lower level things that we've generally had to deal with, and we've had zero concerns there.
Nice. I was hoping you would say Maestro, because then that officially checks off the last piece on our box. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you all have a in-app purchasing capability, right?
That is correct.
So I guess my next question kind of leads into that, and probably, maybe not, but have you had to build any custom native implementations? And if not, what are you all using for your payment solution?
Yeah. So the payment solution itself, because, and a little touchy of a subject, even though we sell a physical hardware product, and we've deemed the mobile application, especially in the eyes that are, as far as charging us fees, we try to state that our application is an application that pairs with our physical device. It is a partner application. However, we couldn't get past that. So we are utilizing React Native IAP, which is just a simple library that allows us to interface with Google and Apple's store solutions for the sake of purchasing downstream. So our Plus purchasing SKU, we now have a frame and a calendar Plus SKU itself, and we're hosting those effectively through the Google Play and App Stores. Now, you kind of talked a little bit about, the native modules sort of things. The things that we're actually having to utilize native modules for is widgets, surprisingly. So we've got a couple different libraries that care about trying to interface on the native side. Like OneSignal is a really good example of that for push notifications. They require on the iOS side for you to have the custom notification service. We have a custom share extension that we also have for, so you're on Google Photos, you want to be able to share the specific assets from outside of the application ecosystem. Their share extension is needed for that. And widgets, yeah. So we have started to proliferate those out. We have a little bit more on the iOS side than the Android side, mostly due to like bandwidth issues because they're native side. So we've got a list widget, we've got a tasks widget, we've got your calendar events widgets, and we're trying to expand that footprint more and more.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, actually. I didn't know that existed. I just pulled up my phone and I added a widget to my home screen now. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And I think, as our listeners are listening, like I mentioned this before we started recording. I bought a Skylight frame for my wife shortly after the pandemic. So kind of early on from what you were saying, but you all had the whole calendar piece and the partner application at the point, but she wasn't necessarily invested in it. We were the type of family that used our dry erase board, where we wrote on a dry erase board our weekly schedule and kind of did like a stand-up view, like, oh, these are our meetings, like we have conflicts here, let's figure it out. And then as our family grew, our son was born about 3 years ago. That's when I was like, hey, remember that frame? It's probably time that we leverage it more at, managing his medical appointments. And as he gets older, we have school and all that. And we've grown to use it daily now. Actually, funny enough, I tried to erase our dry erase board. Still has our weekly schedule on there. It's outdated at this point. I tried erasing it and I had to use some like rubbing alcohol because it's been on there for so long, because we've fully transitioned to Skylight. And and some of this other upsell stuff that you mentioned, like meals and rewards, those are very cool features that I think, we'll be looking at going down the route at some point. So this sounds like a lot of different things that you're doing, especially I know like calendar syncing I've looked to in the past, which is kind of how I found about Skylight. Can get tricky, with all that kind of stuff. So I guess, have you had performance issues with your application, and how have you had to like optimize that down the line?
Yeah, absolutely. So in general, yes, calendar syncing is quite difficult with all the different providers that exist today with, Cozy, Google, Apple. We have our own baked in event solution itself, and trying to ingest all that information, being able to display that, like, kudos to the Google engineers and their month-view implementation. Just absolutely astounding. And trying to replicate an equivocal UX has been a challenge, to say the least. But as far as like performance / how do we improve the performance itself in the application, one of the things that we typically use is Flashlight. So I don't know if you've heard of Flashlight. That is a tool that we use for testing the actual performance itself. So I hook up an Android build, hook it up to my Mac, and start playing around. And I'm trying to see, okay, where am I running into bottlenecks as far as like, where am I throttling the JS thread? Do I have any dips in the UI thread? What does my memory consumption look like over time? I think in general, anytime you're manipulating images and uploading and trying to load those into memory, that can get a little tricky, and especially as we support a frame and calendar where you can upload assets, both photos and videos for. That's something that you have to keep a close eye on. And again, some of those heavier components, like our month view and week view components, instead of our application, are quite heavy. And so we use that tool pretty heavily when it comes to diagnosing some issues during the development lifecycle. Outside of that, in general, we utilize flash lists for most of our lists in the application to date. We've dabbled in Legend List. Legend List 2's out, and we're still considering trying that out in a couple different spots to see how it plays out from a performance side. I think one of our earliest issues that we had with flash lists itself was how well integrated it was with the reanimated library and some of the things we were trying to do, where we had to custom roll our own animated flash list. So the jury's still out as to which tool we're going to use in the future, but that's here nor there. Memoization across the board. However, React compiler is a thing that exists now. Yeah. So we've dabbled it in a little bit. The platform team, which is the team that I effectively overrun as far as like the mobile side is concerned, the engineers keep trying to take it over from me, and I won't let it go. So I'm going to be playing around with React compiler probably next month, see if we can get it over the hump. Hermes V1 is the thing that's now in experimentation, so we're going to dabble in that a little bit. And we migrated over the new architecture as well. So I've had a love-hate relationship with new architecture at this point, though. So
tell me more. I think actually before I kind of move forward, I'll mention to our listeners, we interviewed Alexandre Moreau from Flashlight in RNR 328, and then also Jay Maestrich for Legend List in 325. So our listeners are familiar with these components, and you mentioned Flash List too. We interviewed Talha Naqvi on that too. But, we'll include that in the show notes for sure. But I want to hear more about I kind of said this many times on the show, but tell us a little bit about your journey from the legacy architecture to the architecture, if you see what I did there.
Yeah. .8.2 was officially the point of no return. And, it's a bit scary to say the least. We are on .7.9 right now. I've got a branch off the side where I've migrated up to .8.1. I'm rolling through some regression hotfixes before it makes it full live into production. And I've been eyeing .8.2, waiting for Expo 54 to fully support it before we go down that path. And new architecture / the architecture, it was a bit of a journey. We had several components that just did not play nice whenever we migrated over. So that required a fairly extensive refactor on some of our atoms that we had that were proliferated throughout the entire application, to say the least. I think text input might have even been the worst one, like the worst offender. Reanimated itself, I'll put it this way. We are still dealing with a couple warts, if you will, when it comes to new architecture.
Okay.
I think candidly, the Android performance was promised, right? Like you're saying, oh, you're killing the JavaScript bridge. Your Android performance should improve drastically. And what we found is that there are still, I think there are specific shadow node delays when it comes to how quickly it was able to render on the Android side that they've started to fix, and it's actually experimental flag setting in .8.1 and fully rolled out in .8.2 that I've been eyeing fairly extensively. We've got Reanimated that's trying to improve some of its performance issues. And so I think my largest issue for the migration was less of the whack-a-mole, if you will, of trying to fix the problems that be, and more about like trying to solve for the problems that started to come up due to the fact that the ecosystem was effectively freshly adopting new architecture. And you had libraries that were making this one-off swap. Like, if you want to use this new version, you have to make the swap. That was the case with Unistyles v3, latest MMKV, with Nitro modules, again, reanimated v4. flash list v2. And so we were just staring down the barrel of like, we're going to have to make the swap eventually. Let's pull the plug and just go. And I think today we're still dealing with a couple of those small issues.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. And I think, I think now that we're at the point of no return, it's going to be interesting to see what the future holds. But I'm optimistic. I feel like this is just going to get easier for us, until I think it'll get easier for us. But I say that point is going to come when we stop referencing the old architecture and have officially moved on to 82, right? We're still going to have stragglers behind. We're still going to have, just today, I think it was this morning, I got tagged in an issue for left to right, right to left support. There was a bug in an older version, new architecture versus old architecture. But the interesting thing about that is now that, Meta's fully focused on the architecture and we're not going quote unquote back to it, we can't replicate it, right? Because we can't do the legacy architecture and then come back to the architecture and see the difference between the two. So now what happens, sort of thing. So it's going to be a song and dance for a little bit while things kind of get ironed out there.
Yeah, I'm still very bullish on React Native, right? I think it's this case that when you're making such a massive swap, and look, I've been around the block a couple times. I saw something fairly similar when we were making the migration over to auto-linking in .60. The ecosystem is going to self-correct. It's going to resolve its performance issues when it comes to Android on React Native with hoping .82 and reanimated itself. Like, some of these things are just hard to solve for. They're low level. When you're looking at what turbo modules and nitro modules are really doing under the hood, you're looking close to C level issues. And my background actually originally is in electrical engineering and embedded systems. And so I know that pain very well. And kudos to the team itself for going down this path and endeavor and doing the migration. I'm excited to see what comes forward over the course of the next 6 months.
Yeah, that's awesome. I kind of want to ask you about, have you dealt with any cross-platform differences while using React Native? And, I kind of asked this because there's one platform we've kind of neglected here. I know you all have web. I use it, I wouldn't say regularly, but I use it every now and then. And I have checked the source code and it does seem like it's using React Native. So it's probably a mono repo or, a one repo for all three platforms. Is that correct?
Yeah. So this is a rather new development for us.
Okay.
So we had our app.rskylight.com domain that whenever I joined and up until fairly recently was a very, very, very old React website conjoined at the hip to our Rails repository, and no one wanted to touch that thing with a 10-foot pole. One of the goals of mine was to utilize all the technology and tool sets and all of the logic that we had built already in the React Native side and take over that dashboarding side of things, which is now just ourskylight.com. And that is a fully deployed React Native web implementation. Expo Router, for instance, was like I gotta have this before I ship sort of thing.
Yeah.
In a perfect world, a full Unistyles migration would have been another thing that we would have done. However, people wanted access to it earlier and earlier and earlier, to the point where it's okay, it's good enough. I think that you'll probably see much more scalable UX on that side over the course of the next year or so as we're paying down that debt a little bit. But yeah, from a cross-platform discrepancy sort of thing, again, I've seen it over time, and in general, the ecosystem has gotten really good to where the differences felt are fairly minimal. I think the text input component is the most notable, where how they treat line heights, the actual pressable aspects of it, your keyboard manipulation itself from Android versus iOS is fairly different. And so we've always rolled our own custom text input component that kind of wraps around the base level React Native one and tried to massage out some of those differences whenever we can. But that is just historically one of the worst offenders. That, and we've had weird safe area issues on some Android devices as a good example. And so we've got, random Xiaomi, devices that are like, hey, yeah, it's bleeding into my native button area. I'm like, we've got safe area defined. I don't know what's going on. And we have to kind of work through that. And on the web side, and this may very well be an early Unistyles thing with, React Native Web, but we've also had really weird flex issues where we have style arrays and it just injects a random flex 1 into the style, and it causes quite a bit of headache. And we've had to play whack-a-mole on those specific issues.
Interesting. Huh. That's good to know. Yeah. And I guess maybe because coming from the React Native side, and I just kind of worked on a proof of concept for our web implementation for my current client. I see a lot of stuff that we were doing, right? You're using Flexbox, and I kind of gather that the scaling of all your components and the little tiles that you might have on the calendar on our Skylight.com console. That's pretty cool. Kind of looks like we're getting close to wrapping up, but I have a couple questions I want to ask you real quick. Can you give any advice to companies out there that are considering React Native?
Yeah, absolutely. So in general, React Native as a solution solves, I think, ballpark like 90% of companies out there, their problem sets, especially if you are a startup where you are strapped for cash, you're looking to get MVPs out, proof of concepts. I don't know why you would ever spend the effort to ramp up 2 separate native repositories for it. I think just in general, you're trying to be cost efficient, go with something that's simple. But beyond that, most applications consist of lists, buttons, text, and images, and some hodgepodge implementation of those 4 components, in my opinion. Those are not hard things to implement on React Native. They render extremely performant UI from that. The interfaces that you can implement with these things are very solid. As far as job markets are concerned, you're going to be able to find a ton of JavaScript engineers out there that are either have some bit of proficiency in the React side or have full proficiency on the React Native side. So you're not going to struggle to find engineers to pick up a project in React Native, especially for long term. And a bit of, showcase it, right? There are a ton of large companies out there that utilize React Native daily, us at Skylight do. And so I don't think that you should be concerned that you're spending effort on a tool set that you're going to eventually have to migrate out from. It's something that you can support throughout the entire lifetime of your company.
Yeah. And I think it speaks volumes that you all are, 1, using React Native, 2, on the bleeding edge. You are basically at even though 82 is out, I get that we don't necessarily consider React Native versions as the latest anymore, right? We consider Expo versions as the latest, whatever it comes with. And it sounds like you're about to release that to, your users, and quite a large set of users there too. So I think that speaks volumes for that too. And you kind of touched on this a little bit about how you will always find JavaScript developers out there, but what advice would you give to new React Native developers that are looking to kind of move into the industry or even kind of get settled in React Native?
So again, I've hired engineers that have 0 native experience or 0 React Native experience, and they are fantastic engineers. You try to shield them a little bit from some of the native level things, if you will. You explain a little bit about, hey, this is a view, not a dev. But in general, JSX is JSX, and engineers in general are smart. And so they're capable of picking up those pieces as you go. I think that if you want to be really good at React Native, spend a little bit of time to actually understand what's happening under the hood on the native side. Start to figure out, how build systems work. How does Android utilize Gradle? How can you set up a CI/CD environment so that you can actually utilize Fastlane for generating your IPA files for iOS? I think that almost every engineer that I've seen that spent the effort to do that fully understands and grasps React Native more broadly. and they are able to troubleshoot issues more thoroughly and able to, I think in general, appreciate what React Native then gives back to them.
That's awesome. Last question I'd like to ask you is, would you still choose React Native if you could go back with the knowledge that you have today, if you were to start Skylight over again?
Absolutely, 1,000%. Our application set, especially on the mobile side, there's zero need for it to ever be a native level application. You hear things like links, and you have Flutter and the heydays of Cordova and so on, right?
Yeah.
I don't see a need for us to ever implement a solution that's just not React Native. The ecosystem of engineers is there. The implementation is streamlined, zero problems there. And in general, yeah, I'm just excited to see what React Native looks like a year from now. I kind of mentioned extremely bullish on it and super excited for the broader support for the architecture.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and I'm here hoping that one day your frame will be in React Native too, and that would be awesome for the community too. Well, I think we're officially out of time. Alex, I really appreciate you coming on the show. It was fun chatting with you. I'd like to kind of end this whenever we have a guest is kind of asking, where can people find you on socials, or where are you online?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm most easily found on LinkedIn. I've got an X, but I don't frequent it enough. Gant tried to show me a couple different tools that I haven't fully adopted yet, so it's bad on me, I guess, but easily most on LinkedIn.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Alex, for coming on, and to our listeners, we'll see you all next time. Bye.
As always, thanks to our editor, Todd Worth, our assistant editors, Jed Bartosky and Tyler Williams, our marketing and episode release coordinator, Justin Husky, and our guest coordinator, Mazen Chami. Our producers and hosts are Jamin Holmgren, Robin Hines, and Mazen Chami. Thanks to our sponsor, Infinite Red. Check us out at infinite.red/radio. A special thanks to all of you listening today. Make sure to subscribe to React Native Radio on all the major podcasting platforms.